All right, so in my last video, I really quickly teased the idea of doing an inspection of um, the rocker arm assembly. And so when I was doing in the last video I'm referring to is the head identification video that teach you about what heads can go onto what blocks. And how to identify a head. Obviously the numbers, it tells you straight away, but if you don't have it taken apart or you don't have the lifter cover off, then you can still identify your head to see if it fits into what engine without taking it apart. So anyway, back onto this video. This topic is about the rocker arm assembly. What I've done here is I've taken apart the rocker arm assembly. In the last video, I was talking about how um, certain types of heads have the oil passage that goes in line. If you can see that, yeah. So the oil hole passage is in line with the bolts, right? On this particular, on the 2923. But since this vehicle was a 77, it goes to the next series of valve type or a head type. And so what the last person who had this vehicle had taken the lifters, the rocker arm assembly, off of the old head, which was a newer head, I should say, which is from a 77, and they put it onto this 74 head. So the problem is that in the 77 they had a little offset, so the hole would have come in and it would have been like over here, but instead of this having an on-line, then it's trying to go straight up through the hole. But because this one had an offset, all the oil that was supposed to be oiling this shaft and all of its subcomponents was just falling off right down into here and then going right down back into the engine. So consequently, this shaft was oil starved. And if you can see on here, how badly it's grooved from the rockers rolling on basically no oil. You can see this one here really bad. There's no oil on these, so basically just a little bit of oil would have spurted up in here and you would have not had enough oil to keep it lubricated. So this shaft is toast. It's got grooves. It's worn down to the point where these rockers are going to rattle a little bit. Anytime that you have resistance in a mechanism like this, rockers as they are, the rocker arm assembly is responsible for a great deal of horsepower loss, because it's a lot of moving parts and it's a lot of places where friction can occur. And so I am not going to roll this back into surface. We're going to replace this component here altogether. But just to review and kind of have a teaching moment here on the rocker assembly, I'm going to lay this out for you so you can see how it goes together. So starting from one end of the post to the other, the first thing that goes on is a cotter pin. All right. Oddly enough, when I took this apart, the cotter pin on the back side here, the cotter pin on this side was not even bent. It was just sitting in place. So it just wasn't put together right. But first thing you get on here is a cotter pin, and it goes in there, and then the cotter pin holds a washer like this right here, and then that washer goes and you have a spring that goes on here. This spring goes against is the first rocker, and when you're inspecting these rockers, what you're looking for on here is a wear on the seat. This is where the valve is going to be pushed by the rocker arm. So basically, it's tapping on the valve to push it and open and close the valve, right? There's a little bit of a rubbing motion when it does that, because it's on a circle. It doesn't move up and down. It rotates, right? So that rotation has a little bit of a wear, and it kind of rubs on the top of the valve. And if you don't have oil, like this thing didn't, you can see you'll get a lot of wear, and that's where the valves were rubbing on the top of there. So this is probably going to be replaced as well. the spring runs against the edge of this and it keeps it kind of floating. And then on the inside, there's a brass bushing. This brass bushing, in this case, is, well, brass is a softer metal than the steel that the shaft is. So it's, it's intended to be a wear point so that you don't have to replace the iron or the steel parts. But in this case, you can see there's a lot of discoloration from irregular wear. The inside here is got less wear than the bottom. That's because obviously when the tappet pushes up, the wear is on the bottom here. It's pushing it up, right? So the bottom end of this bushing is all worn out, and that needs to be replaced. So after you get after that first rocker, then it gets to the first post. This first post from the back of the engine, this first post is the most critical because it has the oil hole. The second post and all the other, they don't have an oil hole. You can see that. They just stand static. This oil hole right here, if you recall from my video where I talked about the oil flow pattern, the route, the path for the oil flow from the oil pump all the way through to here. This is the next iteration of that. The oil goes into this little hole and it comes up. I don't know if you can see in there, there's a hole inside there. And when it gets to that hole, then you can see it's going to ride right through here and it'll go right into that hole right there. This is essentially a hollow tube with the ends are capped off. So you can see that doesn't just let oil flow through it, but it's a hollow tube. And at every rocker, it has an exit port. So each one of these rockers should be under pressure, and the oil should be under pressure on each one of these to make sure that they get their proper lubrication. So it comes up through this hole right through here, and it moves on through, and it gets to each one of these little holes here. When it gets to a rocker, you can see that there are, where is it? Okay, yeah. So you can see in the bottom of this bushing, there's a little slot, right? And then at the top here, you can see there's a little squirter, right? So what happens is the oil comes in from the bottom here and it lubricates this. And when it gets up to pressure, right, then the squirter will squirt oil out over onto the valve. And that will keep this tapping mechanism lubricated. And so I mean, if you have a car that makes a tapping noise, the gap between here and the valve is likely needs to be adjusted, and you can adjust that with this. But when you turn your car on and there's no oil flowing, and you might hear a little bit of a tap, and then after it runs for a little while, the oil will spurt over into here, and that tapping will go away because oil will build a film between the valve and this little hook here. So that's basically how that mechanism works. Continuing down the line, right after the first post, you have another rocker. That rocker, again, you can see on here, a lot of wear on that bottom edge down there. So that bushing is shot. A lot of wear on this top piece right up here. I don't know if you can see there's some wear on the ball here, but that's really not that big a deal. But after you get past that second rocker, then you get your first spring, right? These springs, I've seen they sell some kits where instead of a spring, it's just a solid piece of metal and it's a spacer. That I think some of the more performance engines use those, but this is the standard with the spring. And again, looking at the springs, what you're looking for is wear points. And in the bottom of the inside of this spring, you can see this spring has worn. And so since the metal have you lost the thickness of the metal, this spring is no longer as springy as it needs to be. So this spring needs to go. See, the top's fine, then it gets shiny. See that? It's okay up here, and then when you turn it, it gets shiny down here. Just no oil got through anything. So then you go to another rocker, another post, another rocker, another spring, another rocker, another post, another rocker, another spring, rocker, post, rocker. You get the tensioning spring at the end. This one is really bad. You can see how that last rocker has really ground into this spring. You can almost see it go all the way through right there. It's really bad, so this has to be replaced. So yeah, that's another bad spring. And then you get another washer, and then another cotter pin. This is the cotter pin that was unbent. These cotter pins just go on the ends of each of there's a cotter pin shaft right here, another one on the opposite side, and the washers go on either end. So that is the rocker assembly in a nutshell. When you're assembling, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how to adjust the valves because I'm going to do a separate video on that when we get this thing put back together. This is all about inspecting what you have in front of you and making sure that it's serviceable and finding those flaws that are going to steal horsepower from you as you're rebuilding your engine. So this is a quick little video on the rocker assembly for a 1977 MGB Roadster. And I hope it gives you some help. If you like this video, please subscribe, comment, and like. Share it with your friends. Tell your mother about it. and your neighbor and your canoe instructor. Check back next when we get parts. We're going to replace this. I haven't decided yet whether we're going to put roller rockers on, which is an upgrade, or if we're going to go with the stock. Just a matter of what's available and what the prices are. So check back when I get to the reassembly on this the top end of this rocker assembly. Cheers.